From the heart of Africa to your screen. This is Raw Tales Africa, where every story cuts deep. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications because it will mean the whole world to me. Now, let's get right into the story. The hospital corridor echoed with the sound of expensive leather shoes clicking against the polished tiles. Dr. Oladipo emerged from the private ward, his face grave as he approached the small group waiting anxiously outside. The surgery was successful, he announced, his voice measured but hopeful. Your mother is stable now. The tumor has been completely removed. Tears of relief streamed down patient's face as she clutched her one handbag to her chest. Beside her, Mama Kemi's neighbor, Mrs. Aduni, whispered prayers of thanksgiving under her breath. But it was the silence from the corner that drew everyone's attention. There, seated in a pristine white agbada, his gold wristwatch catching the fluorescent light, sat Chief Chibuzor. His face remained expressionless, his eyes fixed on his phone screen as if the doctor's words meant nothing to him. Chief, Dr. Oladipo addressed him directly. Your mother is asking for you. She wants to see her son. Chibuzor looked up slowly, his lips curling into something that barely resembled a smile. Doctor, I appreciate your work. My secretary will handle the payment. He stood, straightening his agbada. I have an important board meeting. Send my regards to the old woman. The corridor fell silent. Even the bustling sounds of the hospital seemed to pause in disbelief. Dr. Oladipo's mouth opened, then closed again, unsure how to respond to such coldness. Patient stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. Chief, sir, that's your mother in there. She just survived a major surgery. She needs you. She needs nothing from me. Chibuzor cut her off sharply. I have done my duty. The bill is paid. What more do you people want? As he walked away, his bodyguard trailing behind him, Mrs. Aduni shook her head in disgust. What kind of son treats his mother like a business transaction? But this confrontation was not the beginning of our story. To understand how a poor housemaid became the hero, while a wealthy son became the villain, we must go back 3 months earlier, when Mama Kemi first started showing signs of illness. 3 months earlier, the morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty compound of the Ibe family house in Surulere. It was a modest 2-bedroom bungalow, faded yellow paint spilling from walls that had witnessed decades of joy and sorrow. The compound was small but meticulously maintained, with potted plants lining the walkway and a single mango tree providing shade near the entrance. Patients moved quietly through the house, her bare feet making soft sounds against the terrazzo floor. At 28, she possessed the kind of beauty that came from within, not polished or refined by city standards, but genuine and warm. Her hair was wrapped in a simple Ankara head wrap, and she wore a faded blue dress that had been mended several times but was spotlessly clean. She had been Mama Kemi's housemaid for 5 years now, ever since she arrived in Lagos from her village in Enugu State with nothing but a small bag of clothes and a heart full of hope. The job paid her only 30,000 naira a month, barely enough to survive in Lagos. But Mama Kemi had become more than an employer. She had become the mother patients lost when she was 15. In the kitchen, patients prepared the morning meal with practiced efficiency. Yam porridge simmered on the small gas burner while she ground pepper by hand, the rhythmic motion meditative in the early morning quiet. Through the window, she could see Mama Kemi in the backyard, tending to her small vegetable garden despite the slight tremor in her hands that had developed over recent weeks. Kemi Ibe was 73 years old, her hair completely grey, but her spirit still vibrant. She moved slowly through her garden, watering tomatoes and picking okra for the evening meal. Her face, lined with years of struggle and sacrifice, still held traces of the beauty that had once turned heads in her youth. She wore a simple wrapper and blouse, her feet in worn slippers that had seen better days. "Mama, breakfast is ready," Patience called from the kitchen doorway. Mama Kemi looked up and smiled, the expression transforming her weathered features. "Thank you, my daughter. How did you sleep?" As they sat together at the small dining table, sharing the yam porridge and palm oil, Mama Kemi's hand shook slightly as she lifted the spoon to her mouth. Patience noticed but said nothing, not wanting to embarrass the older woman. But the worry was evident in her eyes. "Patience," Mama Kemi said softly, "you know, you don't have to stay here forever. You are young, beautiful, intelligent. You should be thinking about marriage, about your own life." Patience reached across the table and gently touched Mama Kemi's trembling hand. "Mama, this is my life. You took me in when I had nowhere to go. You treated me like family when the world saw me as nothing. Where would I go?" Mama Kemi's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But what about children? What about love? You can't waste your youth taking care of an old woman." "Love comes in many forms, Mama," Patience replied quietly. "You showed me the purest kind when you gave me a home. Let me show you the same." Across town in the exclusive Ikoyi district, Chief Chibuzor Ibe's alarm chimed softly at 6 a.m. His penthouse apartment was a monument to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Lagos Island. Italian marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and original artwork adorned walls painted in muted, expensive tones. Chibuzor rose from his king-size bed, his silk pajamas rustling as he moved toward the ensuite bathroom. At 45, he was an imposing figure, tall, well built from regular gym sessions, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. His dark skin was smooth, well maintained through expensive skincare routine, and his beard was always perfectly trimmed. As he showered in his marble-tiled bathroom, steam rising from the rainfall shower head, his phone buzzed with notifications, stock prices, meeting reminders, social invitations, the digital symphony of a successful businessman's life. Chibuzor Ibe was the CEO of Ibe Holdings, a conglomerate with interests in real estate, oil and gas, and telecommunications. His name appeared regularly in business magazines, often accompanied by photos of him at charity galas or government functions. His walk-in closet was larger than most people's bedrooms, filled with handmade suits from Savile Row, Italian leather shoes, and accessories worth more than many Nigerians earned in a year. Today, he selected a navy blue Brioni suit, Hermes tie, and Swiss watch that cost more than most cars. As his driver held open the door of his Mercedes, Chibuzor's phone rang. The caller ID showed mother, but he let it ring. It was the third call from her this week, and he had no time for her usual complaints about her health or requests for visits. He had important matters to attend to: a board meeting with international investors, lunch with the Minister of Commerce, and an evening reception at the governor's residence. His mother could wait. Back in Surulere, Mama Kemi's condition was worsening. What had started as occasional hand tremors had evolved into frequent dizzy spells and persistent headaches. She tried to hide it from patients, but the young woman's observant eyes missed nothing. During their evening prayers, a ritual they had maintained for 5 years, patients noticed how Mama Kemi struggled to kneel on the prayer mat. Her breathing was labored and she often paused mid-sentence, as if searching for words that wouldn't come. "Mama, you need to see a doctor," patient said one evening as she helped the older woman to her bedroom. "Doctors cost money, my daughter," Mama Kemi replied wearily. "Money we don't have." "But Chibuzor," patient started. "Chibuzor has his own life," Mama Kemi cut her off. But there was pain in her voice that had nothing to do with her physical symptoms. "He sends money every month. That should be enough." Patients knew about the monthly allowance, 50,000 naira that barely covered rent, utilities, and basic groceries. It was a pittance for a man who owned 3 houses and drove cars worth millions. But Mama Kemi never complained. She had raised her son to be successful, and if success meant growing distant from family, she would bear that burden silently. That night, after Mama Kemi had fallen asleep, patient sat in the small living room staring at her own savings book. She had managed to save 80,000 naira over the past 2 years, money she had been setting aside to eventually return to school or perhaps start a small business. It wasn't much, but it might be enough for a basic medical consultation. The next morning, she found Mama Kemi collapsed in the bathroom. Lagos University Teaching Hospital was a sprawling complex that served as both hope and heartbreak for thousands of families daily. The waiting area of the emergency ward was filled with plastic chairs, fluorescent lighting, and the smell of a disinfectant mixed with human desperation. Patients sat beside Mama Kemi's stretcher, holding her hand as they waited for the doctor. The older woman's face was pale, her breathing shallow. Around them, other patients and their families waited in similar states of anxiety. A mother cradling a fevered child, an elderly man clutching his chest, a teenager with a bandaged head. Next of kin, a tired-looking nurse asked, approaching with a clipboard. I am a daughter," patients lied without hesitation. In every way that mattered, it was true. Dr. Oladipo, a man in his 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, emerged from behind a curtain where he had been examining another patient. He had seen thousands of cases over his 20-year career, but something about the young woman's devoted attention to the elderly patients touched him. After his examination, he pulled patients aside. His expression was grave. "I am afraid it is more serious than a simple fainting spell," he said gently. "The preliminary test suggests a brain tumor. We will need to do an MRI to confirm." The words hit patients like a physical blow. "A tumor? It is treatable," Dr. Oladipo said quickly, seeing her distress. "But it will require surgery, and soon. The pressure on her brain is causing the symptoms, the tremors, the dizziness, the confusion." "How much?" patients asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Including the MRI, surgery, and recovery, approximately 2 million naira. 2 million naira. The money echoed in patient's mind like a death sentence. It might as well have been 200 million. She had 80,000 naira to her name. Mama Kemi had nothing beyond the monthly allowance from her son Chibuzor. Doctor, please, patient said desperately. Can you wait? I need to contact her son. He has money. He can pay. Dr. Oladipo nodded sympathetically. We can start with some medications to manage the symptoms, but the surgery cannot wait more than a few weeks. After that, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Patients had never been to Ikoyi before. As the commercial bus dropped her off at the junction, she stared up at the gleaming towers of glass and steel that housed Nigeria's elite. The streets were wider here, cleaner, lined with imported cars that cost more than her entire life savings. Ibe Holdings occupied 3 floors of a 30-story building that pierced the Lagos skyline like a monument to capitalism. The lobby was all marble and gold, with a fountain in the center and security guards who looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain as she approached the reception desk. I am here to see Chief Chibuzor Ibe, she told the receptionist, a young woman whose makeup was flawless and whose clothes probably cost more than patients earned in 6 months. Do you have an appointment? The woman asked, without looking up from her computer screen. I am family, patient said, though the words felt strange on her tongue. It's about his mother. It is urgent. The receptionist's eyes flicked up briefly, taking in patient's simple dress, her one handbag, her anxious expression. Chief Ibe is in meetings all day. If you will like to leave a message. Please, patients interrupted, her voice cracking with desperation. His mother is very sick. She needs surgery. I just need 5 minutes. Something in her tone must have penetrated the receptionist's professional indifference. She picked up the phone and spoke in low tones to someone on the other end. After a moment, she hung up. Floor 23. Executive assistant will meet you at the elevator. The elevator ride felt like ascending to another world. When the doors opened, patients found herself in a reception area that looked more like a luxury hotel lobby than an office. Original paintings lined the walls. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases, and the carpet was so thick her feet sank into it. The executive assistant, a middle-aged woman in an expensive suit, approached with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. And you are? Patience. I am here about Mama Kemi, Chief Ibe's mother. I see. Chief Ibe has exactly 5 minutes between meetings. Please, this way. Chibuzor's office was enormous, with windows offering a breathtaking view of the Lagos Lagoon. His desk was a massive slab of imported hardwood, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a palace. Awards and certificates covered one wall, while others displayed photographs of him with governors, ministers, and foreign dignitaries. He didn't look up when she entered. His attention focused on documents spread across his desk. He wore a charcoal grey suit that fit him perfectly, and a Rolex Submariner caught the light as he turned pages. You have 4 minutes, he said, without lifting his eyes. Patients had rehearsed this moment during the entire journey from Surulere. But now, standing in this temple to wealth and power, her carefully planned words abandoned her. Chief, sir, your mother is very sick. Now he looked up, and Patience was struck by how much he resembled Mama Kemi around the eyes, though his eyes were cold where hers were warm. Define sick, he said flatly. The doctor says she had a brain tumor. She needs surgery urgently, or she might die. Chibuzor leaned back in his leather chair, his expression unchanged. I send her 50,000 every month. That should cover medical expenses. Sir, the surgery cost 2 million naira. 2 million? Chibuzor laughed, but there was no humor in it. For an old woman who has already lived her life, do you know what I could do with 2 million naira? The returns I could generate? Patience stared at him in disbelief. Sir, this is your mother, the woman who raised you, who sacrificed everything for your education. Sacrificed? Chibuzor's voice turned sharp. She did her duty as a parent, nothing more. I don't owe her anything beyond basic support, which I provide. But, sir, my mother chose her life, he continued, standing now and walking to the window with his hands clasped behind his back. She chose to remain in that slum in Surulere when I offered to buy her a better place in Victoria Island. She chose to keep that useless maid instead of getting proper help. She chose to live like a pauper despite having a successful son. She stayed in Surulere because it is her home, Patience said quietly, finding her courage. She kept me because I love her, not because I am paid to pretend, and she lives simply because that is who she is, humble, grateful, content with little. Chibuzor turned back to her, his eyes narrowing. And who are you to lecture me about my mother? You are just a maid, a village girl who locked into a job feeding off my family's generosity. The words hit Patience like slaps, but she stood her ground. I may be just a maid, but I see your mother's pain every day. I see how she waits for your phone calls that never come. I see how she makes excuses for why you are too busy to visit. I see how she lights up whenever she talks about your success, even though that success has made you forget where you came from. Enough! Chibuzor slapped his hand on the desk, the sound echoing through the office. You forget yourself. I don't have to explain my decisions to a servant. He pressed the button on his desk phone. Security, please escort whoever this is out of the building and make sure she doesn't come back. As the security guards appeared at the door, Patience made one last desperate attempt. Chief Chibuzor, please, I am begging you, just visit her. See for yourself how sick she is. You don't have to pay for anything. Just be her son for one day. But Chibuzor had already turned back to his documents, dismissing her as if she had never existed. When Patience returned to Surulere that evening, she found Mama Kemi sitting on the veranda, staring at the gate as if expecting someone to arrive. The older woman's face lit up when she saw Patience approaching. How is my son? She asked eagerly. Did you see him? How does he look? Is he eating well? Patience's heart shattered as she looked into those hopeful eyes. How could she tell this loving mother that her son had called her an old woman whose life wasn't worth saving? How could she explain that the child she had raised with such care and sacrifice now saw her as nothing more than a financial obligation? He looked well, Mama. Patience managed. Very successful. His office is beautiful. And what did he say about my illness? The question hung in the air like a blade. Patience sat down beside Mama Kemi on the small wooden bench, searching for words that wouldn't destroy what little hope remained in the older woman's heart. He said he is very busy with important business deals, but he wants you to get the best care possible. It wasn't entirely a lie. He had wanted her to get care. He just wasn't willing to pay for it. Mama Kemi smiled, her face glowing with pride. Of course he is busy. He is such an important man now. When I was carrying him in my womb, I used to dream that it would be great. I never imagined how great. She reached over and patted Patience's hand. You did well, my daughter. I know it wasn't easy for you to go to such a place. You probably felt out of place among all those rich people. Mama, Patience said softly, about the money for your surgery. Don't worry about that, Mama Kemi said quickly. If God wants me to get better, He will provide a way. And if He wants to call me home, then I have lived a good life. I raised a successful son and I found a daughter in you. What more could an old woman ask for? That night, Patience lay awake listening to Mama Kemi's labored breathing from the next room. The medications Dr. Oladipo had prescribed were helping with the symptoms, but they were only buying time. The tumor was still there, still growing, still pressing against the brain tissue that controlled everything that made Mama Kemi who she was. Patience thought about her 80,000 naira savings. It wasn't nearly enough for the surgery, but it might be enough for better medications or maybe a second opinion from another doctor. She thought about her village in Enugu, where her younger brother was struggling to complete his university education. She had been sending him small amounts when she could, hoping to help him build a better future. But as she listened to Mama Kemi's breathing, the choice became clear. Some things were more important than dreams. Some things were more important than the future. Sometimes, love demanded everything you had to give. 2 weeks later, Mama Kemi's condition had worsened significantly. The headaches were now constant, and she had begun experiencing moments of confusion where she forgot where she was or didn't recognize familiar objects. Dr. Oladipo had been clear. They were running out of time. Patience decided to try reaching Chibuzor one more time. But this time, she wouldn't go to his office. Instead, she learned his routine from his social media posts and the society pages of newspapers. Every Thursday evening, he attended a networking event at the exclusive Ikoyi Club. If she could catch him there, maybe in a more relaxed setting, he might listen. The Ikoyi Club was a fortress of privilege, its colonial-era architecture and manicured lawns serving as a reminder of Nigeria's complex relationship with its past. As patients approached the entrance, security guards in creased uniforms immediately moved to intercept her. Members only, one said firmly, not bothering with politeness. I need to see Chief Chibuzor Ibe, Patience explained. It's about his mother. She is dying. You can't enter without a member escorting you, the guard replied. If you want to see Chief Ibe, make an appointment through his office. Patience stood outside the gate, watching expensive cars pull up to the entrance. Mercedes, BMWs, Range Rovers, each one worth more than she would earn in several lifetimes. She recognized some faces from newspaper photos. Politicians, business leaders, society figures. These were Nigeria's elites, the people who made decisions that affected millions but lived in a bubble far removed from the consequences of those decisions. She waited for 3 hours, ignoring the suspicious looks from security and the amused glances from club members who wondered what a poorly dressed young woman was doing lurking outside their sanctuary. Finally, she saw Chibuzor emerge, laughing loudly with a group of men in expensive suits. They were discussing a golf tournament in Dubai, something about private jets and five-star hotels. Chief Chibuzor, she called out, stepping forward. He looked up and his expression immediately darkened. What are you doing here? I thought I made myself clear. Please, sir, Patience interrupted, not caring that his companions were staring. Your mother is getting worse. She had another episode today. She didn't recognize me for an hour. The doctor says if we don't operate soon. Jesus Christ, one of Chibuzor's companions muttered. Is this woman stalking you? It is nothing, Chibuzor said quickly, embarrassed by the scene. Just a family matter. You guys go ahead. I will catch up. As his friends walked away, whispering among themselves, Chibuzor grabbed Patience's arm roughly. Are you trying to humiliate me? Following me to my club like some beggar? I am not a beggar, Patience said firmly, pulling her arm free. I am a daughter trying to save her mother, even if her own son wounds. She is not your mother, Chibuzor is. Stop this pathetic charade. You are a maid. She pays you to clean and cook. That doesn't make you family. Love makes family, Patience replied quietly. Not blood, not money, not love. Love doesn't pay medical bills. Chibuzor shot back. Love doesn't run businesses or create jobs or build economies. You live in a fantasy world where good intentions matter more than reality. And you live in a world where nothing matters except profit, Patience countered. Where your own mother is just another expense to be managed. For a moment, something flickered in Chibuzor's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or regret. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. I am done with this conversation, he said coldly. Don't contact me again. Don't come to my office. Don't follow me to social events. Don't call my phone. If you do, I will have you arrested for harassment. He started walking toward his car, then turned back. And when the old woman dies, because she will die, don't expect me at the funeral. I have better things to do than watch people cry over someone who couldn't even contribute to society. That night, Patience sat beside Mama Kemi's bed, watching the older woman sleep fitfully. Even in sleep, pain creased her features and her breathing was shallow and irregular. Earlier that evening, she had forgotten Patience's name, calling her by the name of a sister who had died 20 years ago. Patience opened her savings book and stared at the numbers written in her careful handwriting. 80,000 naira. She thought about her brother Chidi, who needed money for his final year of university. She thought about her own dreams of returning to school, maybe studying nursing so she could better help people like Mama Kemi. She thought about the small business she had planned to start, selling snacks outside office buildings. All those dreams seemed petty now, compared to the woman who had given her a home when she had nowhere to go. Mama Kemi had found her sleeping in the motor park in Ojuelegba, hungry and scared after being cheated by the woman who had promised her a job as a nanny. Instead of walking past like everyone else, Mama Kemi had stopped, bought her food and listened to her story. You have honest eyes, Mama Kemi had said that day. Come home with me. I need help around the house and you need a place to stay. We'll help each other. That was 5 years ago. 5 years of simple meals shared across a small table. 5 years of evening prayers and morning conversations. 5 years of being treated not as a servant but as a beloved daughter. Mama Kemi had never raised her voice at Patience, never made her feel less than human, never reminded her of her place. When Patience had been sick with malaria, Mama Kemi had sat by her bedside for 3 days, cooling her fever with wet clothes and forcing her to drink water, even when she couldn't keep food down. When Patient's brother had called to say their family's house in the village had been damaged by a storm, Mama Kemi had quietly given her an extra month's salary to send home for repairs. Now, it was Patient's turn to give everything. The next morning, she went to the bank and withdrew her entire savings. 80,000 naira wasn't nearly enough for the surgery, but it might buy them more time with better medications and additional tests. She would figure out the rest somehow. But 80,000 naira alone wouldn't be enough. She needed to find more money, and fast. Patient's next stop was the small electronics store in Surulere where she had bought her phone 2 years ago. The device wasn't new or expensive, but it was her most valuable possession. Her connection to the outside world, her lifeline in case of emergencies. "How much can you give me for this?" she asked the store owner, placing the phone on the counter. The man examined it briefly. "It is an old model and the screen has some scratches. Maybe 15,000. 15,000 naira. Patience thought about all the times that phone had been her companion during lonely evenings, her window to news and entertainment, her way of staying connected with her brother in the village. But Mama Kemi needed medicine more than Patience needed connectivity. "Okay," she said simply. Next, she sold her only piece of jewelry, a small gold necklace her grandmother had given her before she died. It wasn't worth much, maybe 20,000 naira at most, but it was the last link to her family's past. The pawn shop owner barely looked at it before making his offer. 10,000, final price. Patience closed her eyes and nodded. Her clothes came next. She kept only the basics and sold the rest to second-hand dealers in the market. A small collection of books, accumulated over years of saving to buy them one by one, went to a used bookstore for a few thousand naira. A small radio that had been her companion during those countless evenings. A desk fan that had helped her through Lagos' sweltering nights. Even the small mirror she used to braid her hair. Everything went. By the end of the week, she had managed to raise an additional 40,000 naira. Combined with her savings, she now had 120,000 naira. Still far short of the 2 million needed for surgery, but enough to keep Mama Kemi stable for several more weeks while she figured out the next step. When she presented the money to Dr. Oladipo, his expression was a mixture of admiration and sadness. "This will help," he said gently. "We can adjust our medications and do some additional tests. But, Miss Patience, you understand this is only temporary. The tumor is still growing." "I understand, doctor. I just need more time." "Time for what? To find the rest of the money?" Patience nodded. Though she had no idea how she would manage it. She had sold everything she owned. She had no family wealth to draw from, no connections to rich benefactors, no assets to mortgage. But she had something else: determination and the absolute certainty that she would not let Mama Kemi die while there was still breath in her own body. Word of patient's sacrifice spread through the neighborhood like ripples in a pond. Mama Duni, who lived next door and had watched patients care for Mama Kemi with unwavering devotion, was the first to act. She appeared at their door one evening with an envelope containing 5,000 naira, money she had been saving for her daughter's school uniform. "It's not much," she said apologetically, "but it is all I can spare right now." Within days, others began arriving. The woman who sold vegetables in the market contributed 2,000 naira. The bus conductor who had watched patients help Mama Kemi board Danfo every week for doctor's visits brought 1,000 naira and a bag of rice. Even children began showing up with coins they had saved from their lunch money. "Auntie Patience always helped us when we are hungry," a 10-year-old boy explained, pressing 50 naira into her hands. "Now, we want to help Mama Kemi." The local pastor organized a special offering during Sunday service. The imam at the nearby mosque did the same during Friday prayers. Christians and Muslims, Yoruba and Igbo, old and young, the community that had witnessed Patient's quiet acts of kindness over the years now rallied around her in a time of need. Even people who barely knew them contributed what they could. The security guard at the bank, where Patience had withdrawn her savings, heard her story and gave 100 naira. The pharmacist who had been providing Mama Kemi's medications at a discount donated 2,000 naira and pledged to continue providing drugs at cost. By the end of the month, the community had raised an additional 200,000 naira. It was still nowhere near the amount needed for surgery, but it was something more valuable than money. It was proof that kindness creates ripples, that love multiplies when it's shared, that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they come together. Dr. Oladipo had been treating patients for over 20 years, but he had never encountered a situation like this. The sight of patients liquidating her entire life to save someone who wasn't even a biological mother had shaken him. He had grown cynical over the decades, watching families abandon sick relatives when the medical bills became too high, seeing children disappear when elderly parents needed expensive care. But Patience was different. She reminded him why he had become a doctor in the first place. Not for the money or prestige, but to heal, to help, to give hope where there was none. That evening, he sat in his office after his shift, staring at Mama Kemi's medical file. The woman was dying, and her wealthy son couldn't be bothered to save her. Meanwhile, a poor housemaid was selling everything she owned to buy time she couldn't afford. Dr. Oladipo picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. "Michael, it is James Oladipo." "Yes, I know it's been a while. Listen, I need a favor. Remember that article you wrote about healthcare inequality in Nigeria? I have a story for you." Michael Ogunyemi was an investigative journalist with one of Lagos' most respected newspapers. He had built his career exposing corruption and social injustice, but lately, he had been feeling burned out by the endless cycle of scandals and political whatnot. When Dr. Oladipo told him about Patience and Mama Kemi, something stirred in him that had been dormant for months. The sense that this was why journalism mattered. "Can I meet them?" he asked. "The girl doesn't want publicity," Dr. Oladipo warned. "She is not doing this for recognition. In fact, she might not cooperate if she thinks you want to make her famous." "I am not interested in making her famous," Michael replied. "I am interested in making her story matter." When Michael arrived at the small house in Surulere, He found patients preparing dinner while Mama Kemi sat on the veranda. Her condition visibly worse than it had been even a week earlier. The tumor was affecting her motor functions now, and she moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose body was no longer entirely under her control. Patience was immediately suspicious of the stranger asking questions, but Dr. Oladipo had prepared the ground carefully. He is not here to exploit you, the doctor assured her. He wants to help. Dr. Oladipo continued. There are people out there who need to know that goodness still exists in this world. Michael spent 3 hours in that small house, listening to Patient's story without taking notes, wanting her to feel comfortable. She watched her gently help Mama Kemi with her evening medications, noticed how she anticipated the older woman's needs before they were voiced, saw the way Mama Kemi's face lit up whenever Patience entered the room. Why are you doing this? He asked Patience quietly while Mama Kemi dozed in her chair. Because she is my mother, Patience replied simply. Not by blood, but by choice. She chose to love me when I was nothing. Now, I choose to love her when she needs everything. Michael had interviewed presidents and governors, celebrities and criminals, but this young woman's quiet dignity moved him more than any powerful person's grand speeches ever had. What about her son? He asked. Have you tried contacting him? Patient's expression darkened. Her son is a very important man. That night, Michael began writing. He didn't mention names at first. He called Chibuzor simply a wealthy businessman and focused on the contrast between filial obligation and genuine love. But as he dug deeper into public records, he discovered that Chibuzor Ibe was more than just successful. He was a public figure who regularly spoke about family values and traditional morality. The article, titled "The Maid Who Sold Everything While the Rich Son Counted His Money," appeared on the front page of the Sunday edition. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. By Monday morning, it was trending on Twitter with the hashtag Justice for Mama Kemi. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The newspaper's phone lines were flooded with calls from people wanting to help. Social media exploded with outrage directed at the unnamed wealthy son and admiration for patient sacrifice. But it was when someone identified Chibuzor Ibe as the son in question that the story truly exploded. Screenshots of his social media posts began circulating. Photos of him at expensive restaurants while his mother lay dying. Posts about his luxury cars and foreign vacations. Speeches about the importance of family values. The contrast was stark and damning. This is the man who gives speeches about African values while his mother dies because he won't pay for her surgery. One viral tweet read. By Tuesday, protest crowds had gathered outside the Bay Holdings. They carried signs reading, Mama Kemi deserves better, and money without art is worthless. The building security was forced to use a back entrance to smuggle Chibuzor in and out. Inside his office, Chibuzor watched the news coverage with growing fury. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters wanting statements, business partners expressing concern, board members asking questions about his family situation. Sir, his assistant knocked hesitantly. Channel 7 is here for the interview you agreed to. Cancel it, Chibuzor snapped. Cancel everything. I am not talking to these vultures. But the damage was already done. The story had taken on a life of its own. becoming a symbol of everything wrong with Nigeria's growing wealth gap. Radio talk shows debated it, pastors preached about it, and comedians made jokes about it. Chibuzor Ibe had become the face of artless prosperity. As the media storm raged, something unexpected happened. Donations began pouring in from across the country and even from Nigerians in the diaspora. The newspaper set up a bank account for Mama Kemi's medical expenses, and within 48 hours, they had raised over 3 million naira. Dr. Oladipo called patients with the news. "We can do the surgery," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We can save her." Patients broke down crying, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. The community that had already given so much now celebrated as one. Mama Aduni organized a Thanksgiving service, and people who had never met Mama Kemi came to pray for her recovery. But the most surprising call came from an unexpected source. "Is this Patience?" The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Ibe. I am Chibuzor's older sister. I have been living in Canada for the past 15 years, and I just heard about our mother's condition." Patient's breath caught. Mama Kemi had mentioned having a daughter who lived abroad, but she rarely spoke about her children, and Patience had assumed Elizabeth was as distant as Chibuzor. "I am flying to Lagos tomorrow," Elizabeth continued. "I want to see my mother, and I want to meet the young woman who has been more of a daughter to her than I have." Dr. Elizabeth Ibe arrived at Murtala Mohammed International Airport on a Delta flight from Toronto. Her heart heavy with guilt and regret. She was 52 years old, a successful pediatric surgeon who had lived a life in Canada after completing her medical training there. She had 2 children, a beautiful home in Toronto, and a thriving practice. She had everything except peace of mind. The immigration officer recognized her surname and asked if she was related to that businessman in the news. Elizabeth's jaw tightened, but she simply said, "Unfortunately, yes." As a taxi navigated Lagos traffic, Elizabeth stared out at the city she had left behind decades ago. The contrasts were stark. Gleaming shopping malls beside sprawling slums, luxury cars stuck in traffic next to danfos packed with working-class commuters. This was the Nigeria she had fled, the one she had tried to forget. When she arrived at the small house in Surulere, she sat in the taxi for several minutes, steeling herself for what she would find. Had their mother always lived so simply? Patience answered the door, and Elizabeth was struck by how young she looked. This was the woman who had sacrificed everything for a stranger. "You must be Patience," Elizabeth said softly. "I am Elizabeth, Mama Kemi's daughter." Patience's eyes widened. "She has been waiting for you. She always hoped you would come." Inside, Elizabeth found her mother sleeping in a bed that was too small, in a room that was too hot, surrounded by medicine bottles and medical equipment that looked makeshift compared to the hospitals she was used to. But what struck her most was the evidence of love everywhere. Fresh flowers by the bedside, a hand-knitted blanket, photographs of her mother and Patience together over the years. When Mama Kemi woke up and saw her daughter, her face transformed with joy and confusion. "Elizabeth, is this really you, or am I dreaming?" "It is really me, Mama," Elizabeth said, taking her mother's hands. They were so much smaller than she remembered, so fragile. "I am here." "I knew you would come," Mama Kemi whispered. I told patients you would come when you could. You are so busy saving children in Canada. Such important work. Elizabeth's heart broke. Even now, even sick and abandoned, her mother was making excuses for her, choosing to believe the best about her distant daughter. That evening, Elizabeth called her brother. Chibuzor was surprised to hear from her. They had barely spoken in years, their relationship strained by distance and different values. So, you came running back because of some newspaper story, he said when she told him she was in Lagos. I came back because our mother is dying, Elizabeth replied coldly. And because I was ashamed to learn that a stranger has been more of a daughter to her than either of us. Don't lecture me about family responsibility, Chibuzor shot back. You've been gone for 15 years. You send money occasionally and think that makes you a good daughter. At least I send money, Elizabeth countered. What do you send? 50,000 naira a month. That is less than what you probably spend on lunch. I don't have to justify my decisions to you or anyone else, Chibuzor said. I have responsibilities, obligations, people depending on me. Our mother depends on you too, Elizabeth interrupted. Or she did, until she heard she couldn't. The conversation ended with harsh words and no resolutions. But Elizabeth had made her decision. She would pay for the surgery herself and she would stay in Lagos until her mother recovered. The money of the surgery, Lagos University Teaching Hospital was surrounded by well-wishers. The story had captured the nation's imagination and people came from across the city to show support. They brought flowers, food, and prayers for a woman most of them had never met but whose story had touched their hearts. Dr. Oladipo had assembled his best team for the operation. The surgery was complex. The tumor was large and positioned in a delicate area of the brain. But the donations had allowed them to bring in additional specialists and use the most advanced equipment available. Patients sat at the hospital chapel, surrounded by neighbors and strangers who had become friends. Mama Duni held her hand, whispering prayers in Yoruba. The pastor from their local church led the group in hymns. Even the imam from the mosque had come to offer support. Elizabeth paced the waiting room, her medical training making her understand the risks perhaps better than she wanted to. She had assisted in similar surgeries, knew how much could go wrong, understand the fine line between life and death that her mother was walking. The surgery took 6 hours. When Dr. Oladipo finally emerged, his scrubs were soaked with sweat, but he was smiling. It is done, he announced. We got it all. The tumor is gone. The waiting area erupted in cheers and tears. Patients collapsed into Mama Aduni's arms, sobbing with relief. Elizabeth closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanksgiving she hadn't spoken since childhood. Mama Kemi's recovery was slow but steady. The surgery had been successful, but the long journey of healing was just the beginning. She spent 2 weeks in intensive care, then another month in a regular ward. Through it all, patients never left her side, sleeping in a chair beside the bed, helping with physical therapy, encouraging her through the difficult days when pain and medication made everything seem hopeless. Elizabeth stayed in Lagos for 6 weeks, the longest she had been home in 15 years. She watched patients' unwavering devotion with a mixture of admiration and shame. This young woman had given everything for her mother, while she had given excuses. Why didn't you ever tell me how bad things were? Elizabeth asked her mother one day as they sat in the hospital garden. You have your own life, my daughter, Mama Kemi replied. Your own children to raise, your own patients to save. I couldn't burden you with an old woman's problems. But I am your daughter, Elizabeth said, tears streaming down her face. Helping you isn't a burden. It is a privilege. I know that now, Mama Kemi said, reaching for her hand. But I also know that sometimes the children we choose love us just as much as the ones we birth. Patience chose to be my daughter. She chose to stay when living would have been easier. She chose to sacrifice when she had nothing to sacrifice. The media attention had consequences beyond the successful surgery. Chibuzor's business suffered as clients distanced themselves from the man who had abandoned his dying mother. His social standing plummeted, and he found himself excluded from events and opportunities that had once been automatic. But the most devastating blow came from his own employees. A group of them, led by his longtime secretary, presented him with a letter of resignation. We can't work for someone who treats his own mother like a burden, she said quietly. If you can abandon the woman who raised you, how can we trust you with her livelihood? Chibuzor's world began to crumble. Business partners pulled out of deals. His girlfriend left him, and his board of directors suggested he take a leave of absence until the situation improved. For the first time in years, he found himself truly alone, forced to confront the person he had become. 3 months after the surgery, Mama Kemi was well enough to go home. The small house in Surulere had been transformed by donations from well-wishers. A new roof, fresh paint, improved plumbing, and medical equipment to help with her continued recovery. Patients had been offered jobs by several wealthy families who wanted to hire the woman who had captured the nation's heart. TV shows wanted to interview her, and a publisher had approached her about writing a book. But she turned them all down. My place is here, she told every offer, with my mother. Elizabeth had decided to move her practice to Lagos, establishing a free clinic for children in Surulere. She would divide her time between Canada and Nigeria, but she would never again be a stranger to her mother's life. The day before Elizabeth was scheduled to return to Canada to arrange her affairs, an unexpected visitor arrived at the house. Chibuzor stood at the gate, looking nothing like the confident businessman who had dismissed patients months earlier. His expensive clothes were wrinkled. His usually perfect grooming was disheveled, and his eyes held a pain that wells couldn't cure. I want to see her, he said quietly when Patience answered the door. She is resting, Patience replied, not moving to let him in. Patience, he said, and the words seemed to cost him everything. I know I don't deserve it, but please, she is my mother. Patience looked at him for a long moment. Seeing not the cruel businessman who had called his mother worthless, but a broken man who had finally realized what he had lost. She is in the garden, Patience said, stepping aside. Mama Kemi was sitting under the mango tree, slowly braiding Elizabeth's hair as they talked quietly. The sight of her 2 children together after so many years had brought her more joy than all the medicines in the world. When she saw Chibuzor approaching, her face lit up with the same unconditional love she had shown him as a child. Despite everything, despite his cruelty and abandonment, she was still his mother. My son, she said softly, rising unsteadily to embrace him. Chibuzor fell to his knees before her, tears streaming down his face. Mama, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was wrong. I was cruel. I forgot. I forgot who I was. You are my child, Mama Kemi said, stroking his hair as she had when he was small. You are my son and I love you. I have always loved you. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Chibuzor sobbed. I called you worthless. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I became a monster. No, Mama Kemi said firmly. You became lost, but lost children can always find their way home. 1 year later, the small house in Surulere hosted a celebration unlike any the neighborhood had ever seen. Mama Kemi's health had been fully restored, and she moved through the party with the energy of a woman 20 years younger. The tumor was gone. The doctors declared her cancer-free, and she had become a symbol of hope for families facing similar challenges. Patients wore a beautiful dress, a gift from Elizabeth, and her smile was radiant as she served guests. She had finally accepted one of the many job offers she had received, but not from a wealthy family. Instead, she had become the coordinator of a foundation established by Elizabeth to help families facing medical crises. Her first-hand experience with the healthcare system's failures made her uniquely qualified to help others navigate the same challenges. Chibuzor stood in the corner of the garden, watching his mother laugh with her neighbors. He had sold his luxury cars and his penthouse apartment, using the money to establish a medical fund for indigent patients. His business had recovered somewhat, but he was a changed man, quieter, more thoughtful, more aware of the world beyond his own success. She forgave you, Elizabeth said, joining him. I almost lost her forever because of my pride. But you didn't lose her, Elizabeth pointed out. You came back. You chose to be her son again. Across the garden, Mama Kemi raised a glass of palm wine to address the crowd. I want to thank everyone who helped save my life, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the compound. But most of all, I want to thank God for giving me 3 children. One I carried in my womb, one I carried in my heart, and one who carried me through my darkest days. She looked at Chibuzor with love, at Elizabeth with pride, and at Patience with pure devotion. Love, she continued, is not about blood or duty or obligation. Love is about choice. Every day we choose to love or to abandon, to give or to take, to be present or to be absent. Today, I am surrounded by people who choose to love. As the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the party continued. Children played between the chairs, adults shared stories and laughter, and 3 generations of women, connected not by blood but by choice, sat together under the mango tree. Patience had lost everything she owned, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable. She had learned that love multiplies when it is shared, that sacrifice creates abundance, and that sometimes the greatest riches are found in the simplest acts of kindness. Mama Kemi lived for 7 more years, surrounded by love and laughter, her small house a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed dark. When she finally passed away, peacefully in her sleep, thousands of people came to her funeral, not because she was rich or famous, but because her story reminded them of something fundamental about human nature. We are all connected. We all have the power to choose love over selfishness, sacrifice over comfort, presence over absence. In the end, The richest person in the room is not the one with the most money, but the one with the most love. And in that small house in Surulere, love had always been the greatest treasure of all. Thank you for watching this story of love, sacrifice, and redemption. Like and subscribe to Raw Tales Africa for more inspiring tales that remind us of the power of human kindness. Remember, we all have the power to choose love over selfishness, and sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything.